Cool.
What's shaking, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the DisJointed Podcast. I've been away for a little bit. That's because life has been routinely slapping me in the nuts. But I got a new job. Everything's back on track. I'm hitting the stage. As a matter of fact, on the screen you'll see my next show where that's coming up, and you can find more tickets, more information about that at disjointedpod.com. This week I have another great episode, man. This one, these are the ones I'm really, really excited about. This is one I'm glad that I was born in the age that I was, because I get to have conversations with people that I've never really talked to before, but I know we have a few similar interests. I've had folks from the UK before. We've had Adrian Hume Robinson, a filmmaker. We've had Rebecca Turner. We had Ray Davies, another awesome, great comic and stuff. I got another great comic here today, man, talking about comedy in the UK and how they go from their 9-to-5 life to a one of creativity, or maybe they've already done it. I don't know. I'm excited about it. This week's guest is McEwan. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me on, man.
I don't know if I pronounced that McEwan?
McEwan, you got it bang on.
All right, good. Okay. I just want to make sure, because, you know, there's not so much of a language barrier, but, you know, there's a couple of words or a couple of pronunciations that we do things differently over here.
Like yeah, don't worry. Like, I have it all the time that people say to me that I speak really funny. The reason behind that is because I'm half Scottish, half German, so I'm screwed.
Dude, that's amazing, though. That's an accent that's going to stand out, man. There was a fella where my wife works. She works at a hotel, and he's a big guy, and, you know, just kind of walking around. He had this weird look on his face, and, you know, kind of like awkward. And so I'm like, I'm going to go and actually talk to this dude. And I could tell that his accent, he's from the UK. But I'm like, okay. And I've learned to never guess or try to guess where somebody's from in the UK, because I will always guess wrong. And I'm going to guess the one place that they absolutely hate. You know, I'm like, is that a Liverpool accent? They're like, Manchester, you fucking twat. And I'm like, oh, sorry about that. Okay. Well, my bad. Irish, Scottish, yeah. It's just like I'll always guess wrong. But no, he was from Sheffield, so that's like in the middle of the country, right?
Well, yeah, and I can tell you now that, like, your Liverpudlian or Mancunian accent there was better than anything that I can do. And I'm from this country.
You know what? I have a love of accents, and I love to try to imitate them. Sometimes they'll get me in trouble, but because I think it's fascinating, man, especially the UK, because you can travel in like 20 miles and suddenly there's a completely different accent, and accents mean so much, or mean more, not to say so much, but more so than they do, let's say, here in the United States. You know, I mean, granted, there's certain situations, like if you're going to walk into like a brain surgeon or a neurosurgeon, and the guy's like, hey, y'all, all right, we're going to check inside that brain here to see what's going on there. And you're like, oh, shit, this isn't going to be good. This is going to be bad. But
I think we're a little bit more, I guess, I don't like to say open or welcoming, I guess, to the accent thing. Like, certainly there's a number of people who are fine with if someone sounds like they might be what you'd consider to be stupid, I guess, for lack of a better term. Like, because it's that understanding of like how those things can be like deceptive. You know, like me, for instance, for years, I always used to think I sounded dumb as fuck. And now I'm going to university, and I've got stacks of books everywhere, and I'm doing really intricate kind of thesis kind of material and all this different stuff. And it's like, I can't put it into words, but when I write it, it sounds intelligent.
I know, it's one of those little breakthroughs, because I mean, these kind of, it's strange how these social systems that have been in place for centuries, you know, to try to give you an idea. It was my personal feeling has always been like to try to, even though the stereotypes have been working for way more against us, more so now than, let's say, in the past. But the whole idea is I'm meeting a stranger for the first time. Are they going to kill me? Yes or no? You know, how can I figure this out as quickly as possible? And yeah, it's. I think it was on another podcast that I was hearing about, but I'm like, this is the first time you think about it in human history when people like strangers show up on boats to your country. Chances are they're here to spend money, and they're tourists. When if you go back 400 years and a bunch of strangers pull up on your shores, you're like, ah, shit. Quick, hide all the valuables and the women, and we're probably gonna have to either kill these guys before they kill us, you know. And it's definitely it's a bizarre, it's an interesting time and stuff. So sometimes it's
Yeah.
kind of hard to get past that. I understand I think it's on a genetic level. I don't think it's all just, you know,
No, that's
intolerance.
it. It's yeah. I think it's basically just people. The best way to put it is some people are dicks and some people aren't.
Yeah.
Some people are more kind of understanding of others, and other people aren't.
It's strange. It's strange for sure. Uh, so let's get into it a little bit here. So for the folks, or at least you know what little audience I have, which I'm thankful for everybody who listens to this podcast. But let's start with an origin story, so we kind of get to know you a little bit, sir. How long you been doing comedy? What got you into it?
Okay, so I've been doing comedy for about 3+ years. But what got me into it was I went through a really rough patch in my life, as all good comics do.
Right.
I was, I was writing satire at the time for a blog online, and people kept saying to me, "Oh, you should go perform it. You should go show people and actually speak it like it's comedy." And I always wanted to do it, and I got put out of work, and it kind of left me in a bit of a situation where I wanted to uh, kind of explore what to do next, you know?
Right.
And so I started going to improv lessons with a brilliant teacher who's called Andrew Allen. He's in Brighton here, and yeah, like he just taught me like everything that I needed to get my confidence back and be okay with standing in front of people and talking again, because I spent years in a job where I was getting knocked down quite a lot. So yeah, like it was off of that really. It was just like, okay, next step is doing some of this comedy that I've been writing for years and enjoying writing. So I jumped into it. First gig I did fell flat on my ass, basically.
Right. As well we all should have, sir.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
There's a certain thing, you know, it's so strange. I was talking to this other comic that she's like, so how long have you been doing comedy? I'm like, or when did you start? I started when I was 35. And most people out here, if you start comedy around then, it's probably because of a divorce. And but it's something that's kind of like, yeah, life just basically punched you right in the nads, and you're like, all right, everything sucks. Might as well just get on stage. And it's this weird compulsion that kind of happens where there's all this great entertainment that I've seen, you know, on many of these stages that are in Colorado and Arizona and whatnot. It all stems from somebody being pretty broken at some point or the other, which is
Yeah, I
really,
think,
it's amazing, I think.
yeah, you get put into a situation where essentially the gun's at your head.
Yeah,
I mean that like metaphorically, obviously.
right. Depending on what mic you
But
go to, yeah.
yeah, but yeah, you just kind of you reach a point where all you can do yourself is laugh, and so you kind of think like I feel low, like, and I don't feel low when I'm laughing, and maybe like I can find humour in some of my own misfortunes and make other people laugh so they don't feel miserable. Maybe it's something like that, almost like the depression thing, where there's I'm not going to act like an expert on it, but certainly there's an element of depression where there's people who people like Robin Williams, like when he would always do his best to make people laugh and be happy around him because of how awful he felt.
Yeah, there's definitely something I think too, and this is where things kind of get tricky. I think with comedy, at least here in the States these days, is that when folks talk about certain subjects that are taboo, right, or certain things you're not allowed to talk about this, you're not allowed to talk about that, and my feeling on it is that it's all well-meaning, you know, because
Yeah,
ideally it's just we don't want people to get hurt and stuff, but what kind of, and I'm not trying to twist your words of what you're saying. This is just
no, no,
my own thing. Is that yeah, there are some really really dark, horrible things that have happened in my life, and the only way that I got past it is I had to find the humor in it. And
Yep.
that's what I'm trying to share with everybody. And I think that's what a lot of comics, I think they're I won't say all comics, but there's a lot of comics that are trying to do that. And sometimes when it works, man, everybody's like, wow, that really, really made me feel good. And then there's other folks, you're in a church, you're accidentally pouring salt on their wound, with Tabasco.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Yeah.
that's not what I was trying to do.
Well, that's it. There is that element of it being very cathartic for a lot of people, to be able to do that, to make others laugh and realise actually, yes, this is okay to laugh about. But yeah, not everyone is able to do it. They try it, or God forbid they don't try, and they just get hurt.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely where the work is, right? I mean, the work of stand-up comedy, the nuts and bolts of it. We're like, uh, you know, it's like making a samurai sword. You have to keep folding the steel and keep working it over and over and over and over again until you kind of get it right. So where folks do understand. I made that mistake with a joke that was a little edgy, and and I've mentioned this before on my show before, but I almost got in a fight over it because the guy thought that I was making fun of special needs people, and granted, if I was as drunk and as coked up as this guy was, I probably would have seen it the same way. But
Well, I think we've all got one of those stories.
oh yeah, and
Joke, like,
he was telling me I shouldn't tell it, and I'm like, I'm not changing my act, but it did make me go back. I'm like, how can I make this more clear and more concise, so that way there's less wiggle room for people to get the wrong idea,
Yeah, that's kind of a little bit like what I had, because and now I throw my hands up and say that I was in the wrong over this. I made a joke. I won't say the joke, but it was, for lack of a better term, it was a rape joke. And it was at a time when I was trying to be a bit more edgy. And truth be told, I didn't really enjoy the material I was doing. So I did the show, and I told a series of jokes that led up to this particular joke. And another comedian actually got offended, and kind of ended up a little bit of a social media backlash.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like it was posted up. She was actually to be as transparent as possible on this. She didn't say my name in the post that she put up.
Okay.
And I responded saying, no, that's one of my jokes that you're talking about, and tried to explain that the way I told it, the context of it was wrong, or the way that it was received was wrong, and just said I apologise. And yeah, it all kind of got spun into something else that it wasn't. First I was blamed for being sexist, then I was blamed for supporting something that I shouldn't be supporting.
Oh, the second coming of Hitler. Let's say you want to kill everybody. Was that it? Was because there's a lot of that goes along. Everybody's
it was. Let's put it this way: the joke was basically, "What's worse than?"
Yeah.
Yeah. So at no point in that joke was it me celebrating the act of rape or anything like that. But I took on board, and I understood that I caused offence, and I apologised. And yeah, like I was getting people messaging me, almost like the beacons of justice online, as they always are. And they're saying, "Oh, you shouldn't say these things." I said, "Well, I've apologised. I'm sorry if any of the conversation has offended you as well." And they said, "You shouldn't say these things. You're a horrible person." And then they'd start making threats.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you're the ledger of what's good in the world, and now you're threatening me. And then it went a step further. They started threatening my family, like my kids.
Oh, Jesus.
Like, whoa. Okay, and that was it. I just lost it. I started messaging these people back after being as courteous as I could be, and I was just like, right, I do not want to talk to you anymore about this. Go fuck yourself.
Right.
Like, that's the way you're going to respond. Like, you've said that I've offended you, and then your response to that is by offence back, but taking it just way too far. Like, and it was like, no, I'm not gonna accept that. So, yeah, it pissed me off because I kind of I got put into a situation where I did, I like I said, I threw my hands up and said, "Yep, I absolutely take blame for that because it was my joke. It's offended people in a bad way. I apologise for that. It's a joke that I will no longer perform, and then I'm getting death threats."
Yeah, it's really this is one of the the marvels about the internet is you and I are having this conversation on two different parts of the planet, which is awesome. The downside is it took away a lot of social constructs that were in place to avoid murder, right? Like there's certain things you don't do to another person when you're talking to them face to face unless you're willing to put your life up on the line, like slapping somebody that you don't know. You
Yeah,
slap somebody, it's very, very, very possible that could just end in a massive beatdown and going to the hospital, or it could end up with somebody going to the grave and then another family crying for the rest of their lives because they've lost their loved one. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like that's
yeah,
human nature, and the internet is kind of like put a reset button on that. Where I'm like, you're playing with fire when you guys do this because you seem like a very fairly reasonable person, right? And
yeah,
granted, but when you're insulting somebody's or threatening somebody's family or their job and how they feed their family, violence is going to ensue, man. And I think and I've seen a lot of this happen. I'm probably also here in various comedy scenes around the United States where there are. I say there. This is going to sound really douchey, by the way, for me. Uh, there are comics who are artists, right? And they're putting in the work and they're taking chances. And then there's a lot of hobbyists who like to hang around comics and they'll even go up on stage. They might even have a couple of minutes where they're doing pretty good, but they're not. I don't consider them artists because they don't really
right,
put a lot of their work themselves into it. There's not a lot of growth and stuff. They just like being in the scene. They like
yeah,
having
yeah,
friends and stuff like that, which I get that, but some of us are trying to do the work, and sometimes we're going to have to step on some toes, and we're going to have to go through. Like, I'm sure you came out as a more polished comic from telling from when you first told that joke to where you are now, correct?
yeah. I kind of come away from it having a better idea of what kind of comedy I wanted to do
Right.
because I'd just done a solo show and I took a real risk doing the solo show because I'd only been doing comedy for a year
Mm.
and I did this. It was just a small kind of thing at a tiny festival that was over here called Hove Grove
Mm.
because I'm in the city of Brighton, which is Brighton and Hove, and so this little festival done in the Hove area, and yeah, I was kind of left after that, I guess, with a slightly big ego because it went well.
Right.
Um, I thought I could get away with certain things,
Yeah.
and I realised very quickly that I couldn't, and it put me in a position to go, okay, right, step back. What do I actually find funny?
Hmm.
What do I enjoy performing? And so it gave me, yeah, it was nice to be humbled, you know?
Dude, those are really, really important. I remember. I'm so glad this had happened to me when I was a teenager. I was taking martial arts. So this is the early '90s. The UFC hadn't been around yet, and
Yeah,
we hadn't seen exactly like anybody who took karate or any type of martial arts and stuff like that. I took Aikido and Muay Thai, and so you're thinking, oh, this is cool. I'm learning a really good art. And then once the UFC came out, you're like, oh, all that shit that I learned is completely worthless. Wow. Ooh. But one of the things that was really important was the sparring in Muay Thai because that's where I learned that I suck at fighting and I should do my best to avoid any type of physical combat because I got kicked in the jaw like at least, 3 times, punched in the face, I don't know how many times. Like, unless they wanted a heavy bag that cried when you hit it. That was the only reason for me to be in that class. So, but the whole thing is that it was a super humbling experience because especially as guys, man, when you got that testosterone pumping through you, you think you're invincible, until you
yeah,
get tested and humbled, and you're like, ah, crap, you know.
yeah.
I mean, I'm
So
not
if you're
Superman.
hearing,
I'm not bulletproof. Aw, you know.
I was just about to say, if you're hearing strange noises, I'm being attacked by a cat at the moment, so.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. But
I,
yeah, you say about that. I kind of, I didn't go into I guess it is a area of physical, like combat to a degree. I used to be a pro wrestler.
Mm.
Like this was even even for me an age ago. This was well, probably best part of 10 years ago now.
Right.
And so I say pro. I use that term loosely. Semi-pro at most. It was basically I just always wanted to get involved in pro wrestling, and so I went and I learnt how to take bumps and how to land correctly and how to do some of the moves. And I remember, like, I've got this whole bit that I do in some of my comedy about it, and I embellish it a little bit, which was basically about walking in to the company that was training me at the time and saying, I've got this great idea, man. I want to be this character called the Executioner, Ant McEwan, and I want to take people's heads off with like these moves and all this stuff. And they basically just looked at me and gone, no, you're going to put on this ridiculous looking lucha mask. And like they said, like, what's your Mexican like? And I just, I don't know I don't know any Spanish, so I've just kind of gone, ¿qué? And they've gone, oh dear. so they said, like, you're going to be an Italian luchador.
Nice.
It's like, oh God, it just got so bad. The thing is, I tell the story like that, and it sounds like this was all put on me, that it was all this bad idea. But actually, the entire bad idea, and I'm kind of letting a secret slip here now, the entire bad idea was of my own doing.
Right.
I went, this is what I want to do. I don't want to win a single match.
Yeah.
I just want to take beatings for the next, like, year or 2 years.
You could have a pretty decent career, I think, in indie wrestling doing that, as long as you make everybody else look good, right? I mean, everybody needs that, somebody who can work.
Well, that was it. It was basically me, and I ended up having a tag team partner, and we were called Gino and Gino, the Italiadors. And we just basically bumped around for people, just putting people over.
Wow.
Guys that will come in, okay, like we'll do 2-on-1, and this guy will absolutely beat the hell out of us. So that was our job, man. It was fun.
That's something that I always wish that I could. I'm way too old to do it now, but I know there's a couple of indie promotions out here in Denver, and run by this guy Nick Gossard, who does Lucha Libre and Laughs. If you guys, anybody in the UK area, check it out. Just look up Lucha Libre and Laughs, and it's basically he does comedy and then wrestling.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's one of the most popular shows. This guy, and what's so great. Nick Gossard's a very abrasive dude, and if you listen to any of the shows that he's been on, he'll tell you that he's a dick, right? But he's a promoter. He's kind of has to be. He is the only promoter in Denver that I know of that gets legitimately really depressed and upset if he only brings 400 people to one of his shows. Right?
High expectation.
No, but he can do it. He can feel like the way that this guy promotes and stuff. He sells out these shows and stuff, and he does a really good job of it. So he was like most of the other shows out here in Denver, we're lucky if you get 10 people in the crowd, and 5 of those people aren't other comics or dating any of the other comics and stuff. So he's been doing his best really to kind of push promotion out there. And we were kind of talking about it a little bit before, as far as like. Getting out there and getting your name out, trying to do as much as possible, like the business aspect of this whole thing that we're doing.
Yeah.
So
sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say for example, this is. I wish I could say that this is the only show, audio show that you were doing today, but this is what, number 4, number 3.
Number 3, yeah.
Right.
Basically, like I do a lot of the projects that I do for similar reason to you. One of the radio shows that I do is called Loud Lunch Live, and it's exactly what it says on the tin. We do a live radio show on a Wednesday lunchtime, playing rock and metal music, and I get often comedians to come in, people who often don't get the kind of platform to talk like this. So it gives them a chance to show a bit of their personality, talk about what they're doing, what projects they're involved in, gives themselves a bit of promotion, and a bit of radio experience, because they don't get that. Like, this was what I found when I started out, trying to get any kind of opportunity to get your voice out there and to talk about what you're doing is very difficult.
Yeah, it's also kind of interesting. One of the things that I found in doing this, at least podcasting over the past couple of years, is finding out which people are better at promotion and who has a better following than others. And it doesn't always necessarily and this isn't a knock on anybody that's been on the show before, but just because somebody's really hilarious on stage doesn't mean they have a lot of followers.
No, that's true.
You know, it's kind of this weird. There's this weird kind of linear thinking that when it comes to, I think it's just because anybody who's gone through the public education system, is that you work hard at this one thing and you're going to get this. Work hard at A and the result is going to be B,
Yep.
Or you just do this, and that's not necessarily the same thing. Or I'm like, oh no, you're doing 5 different things right now. You're working on your jokes. You're also trying to build an audience, and you're also trying to promote it and trying to reach new people. You're also trying to do that, and it's like, there's times when I've had like great guests and stuff on here, and I'm like, man, I can't wait to get this episode out, and then like you don't see as many shares as you would have liked. I would have liked to have seen, Yeah,
I have the same whenever I'm promoting any event that I'm running. It's exactly the same. I've set up an event page on Facebook because I primarily do a lot of my promotion on there, and I'll get really disappointed and down when there's people, like, there's not very many numbers of shares or people wanting to go to the gig or listing that they're going or even saying they're interested in going.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm putting all the legwork and I'm putting these fancy posters together.
You're right. It's like, you assholes, I'm asking you to click on a button, you bastards. Like, come on.
Yeah.
I'm paying you, aren't you? Aren't I? Friggin' hit like that you might be interested in going, seeing as you're booked on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's always fun. Gosh, well, there was a. So you've also run a couple. You're like, I know at least one mic out there in Brighton, right? Because I was watching some of the videos and stuff that you put up.
Yes. I run Brighton Comedy Open Mic, otherwise known as BCOM. Basically, it's essentially a comedy open mic, as we say, but we're trying to turn slightly away from it and do because I took over the entire running of it about a year ago.
Right.
It was run by someone else, and we were getting the same 5 like comics always showing up, and they weren't really trying anything new. They weren't even working on their old material, doing it differently, and it was boring and it was stale. Like, it's not a knock on the person who was running it by any means, but there certainly wasn't enough of a passion behind it.
Right. It's people get stuck in ruts. I get it.
Yeah. And so when I got asked to take it over, I come in and I said, right, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to kick the door open to the entire country instead of it just being Brighton. So I want people from all over to come down. And by doing that, I was getting people come literally from all over. I was getting people from all over the world coming.
Oh, wow.
We had, I had a comic friend of mine, Dave Thompson. He dropped me a message and said, like, I've got a comic who's flying in from Sweden and she's off the spots this week. And I said, like, when's she here? She said, she gets in tonight. I said, I'm running a gig tonight. Drive her straight down and get her on my gig.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we, and then as it turned out, it was like Sweden via Cambodia.
Oh, wow.
So
excuse me, sir. I was told there was going to be somebody a hot chick from Sweden here. Like, I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that, I mean, you got to warn a guy. You're expecting some 6'3" blonde, and you're like, exact opposite, sir.
It was brilliant because it was a whole different style of comedy.
Right.
And that's when I started going, this is what we need to do, is get different acts in. And not just stand-up either. So I started putting the feelers out for sketch and improvisers and character comedy and music and all kinds of weird and wonderful things. And now we pretty much integrate everything into our shows. Like,
wow.
So we'll have like a live house band. We started doing that before anyone else really was doing it in Brighton. I know there was one gig a long time ago that was doing it, but they stopped doing it. So we started doing it again, but we were getting musical comedy acts as opposed to just any music act. Then we're getting sketch acts that are on and having them as headliners, which no one had done really at that point, or certainly not for a long time. And so I wanted to do something completely different with the night, and now that's what we're doing now. I mean, the night I've got coming up, it's on the 2nd of May. We've got 3 sketch acts, and one of them's headlining. 2 poetry comedians. We've got more female acts on this show than male. I think we've got like 2 male acts, and then because the large number of people within the groups in like the sketch acts, like we've got something like 8 or 9 women. So we're getting to do something like just completely different from, or certainly it was for a time completely different from what everyone else was doing. Now, because I kicked the door open in Brighton and we were starting to get more sketch acts seen, now some of the other nights are starting to pick them up, and we're starting to see the whole kind of landscape of Brighton comedy changing because we were daring to do what other nights weren't at the time.
That's always the strange thing. I remember that as far as like even just in business, I worked for this Greek restaurant back in New York City, and the guy was a tyrant, but he's like, you always look at what the other guy doesn't want to do, and that's what you start. You know,
yeah.
Look at where nobody else is willing to go, and then you start from there. And I'm like, wow, holy shit! All right, he's got a point. But that's cool because it seems like because I only saw like I caught the tail end of one of the videos and stuff, and it seems like an actual show. It's not like and this isn't shitting on the mics out here in Denver. I'm not, because I need those mics. But it's different. It seems like you're putting an actual show together as opposed to, hey, look, you're trying to watch the game, and then suddenly somebody sets up a PA system and a microphone, and you're like, shit, comedy's going on here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. To me, I looked at what everyone else was doing, exactly what you said, and went, well, how can we do differently? And I was going to loads of people's nights, and again, like yourself, I'm not trying to shit on everyone else's nights, but I was watching other people's nights, and some of them are starting to find them stale. The comics were brilliantly funny, but when you've got 8 or 9 stand-up comics, it gets a bit tedious after a while.
Yeah.
You start going like, how much can I put up with watching one person stand there and say, this is my joke, this is my joke, this is my joke? And so
about 90 minutes.
I looked at that, and I was just like, well, how can we do it differently? Well, comedy open mics are usually boring, so let's make it fun. Let's make it a show. Let's do different things. Start integrating acts that no one else is really talking to, and give them a bit of attention. Then we started looking at the live stream, and I still need to be corrected on this. I'm not sure where we stand on this, but a number of people told me that we were the first in the world to ever do that, to ever live stream like a whole show. So
yeah, that's the other thing. Are you doing that on Twitch or how? Where are you doing that with?
We were doing it on, right, this is the interesting thing. We were doing it on Facebook Live.
Okay.
But we were running a system with multiple cameras, and Facebook Live doesn't like it.
Yeah.
And so it kept throwing out the feed. This is what we found with the last time we tried to do it. So what we're looking at now is, I think the guy that does all the tech for me, he's saying that we need to use YouTube Live because their system actually welcomes that kind of video production. So that's what we're looking at next.
I've been because I do obviously this podcast, and I also do one about the restaurant industry, and that one I usually would stream all that on YouTube, and then I would put like this. I'll put this on everywhere. But I was doing Twitch for a bit. I'm still doing it, but that's a completely different animal, and that's a much younger crowd for the most part. But there's a lot of people trying to do some really things. Like I've seen a couple of a few more like. Improv shows that they're trying to do live streaming with and trying to get people Yeah, I mean, there's things they could definitely do better. Like for sure, don't show an empty auditorium, guys. But like, yeah, show it. Yeah, it's an interesting prospect. It's cool because it's more art getting out there to everywhere. I did want to ask you this one question. Do
Yep.
comics in the UK hate musical acts as much as they hate musical acts out here in the United States?
No,
Oh,
no.
really?
I think
You guys are more
I
accepting. That's great.
yeah, yeah. I think genuinely over here, this was one of the things that I wanted to tap into with my night. The audiences want diversity,
Mm.
and the reason behind that is because mainstream, what they're seeing on, like you think, for us, our big Saturday night television shows are things like Britain's Got Talent,
Okay,
and
yeah.
it's very much a focus on how different all the acts are. And so, like, even though that's not comedy, it's all variety. And so, there, we love variety in this country. If we're going out to be entertained, we want something different, and that's one of the primary failings of a lot of the comedy nights in this country. And
Hmm.
I'll probably get stick from some people for saying that, but that's fine. Like I've gotten stick for worse things. So, like, yeah, basically, you've got some really funny people in your night, but if they're all doing the same thing, then that's why you've got like 3 or 4 people in your audience.
Yeah.
Like, they love diversity. Give them something different.
Love and a bit with a dog. Yeah, that was. Sorry, just quoting Shakespeare in Love. But which is still one of my favorite guilty pleasure movies. Oh god, that was really good. Like I study theater, and it's anybody who studies theater. That's one of their dreams to perform even if it was a walk-on role somewhere in England, just because you're like, oh, this is where if I could do it there. But what I loved about that movie is that it showed exactly how depraved all the artists really are.
Yeah.
Which I really dig about it. Like everybody's banging everybody. They're just cheating on everybody. They're just a bunch of just horrible people. I'm like, yes, that's the theater, sir.
I think though the unfortunate thing with that film was that it was very Hollywood commercialized. Um, so I don't know how much, although it was the darker ages back then,
Yeah,
so maybe they were all in on it. But certainly I didn't think the invention of tit tape come about until later on.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Excuse me, sir. I have a complaint about this film. Yeah, that was. But no, you know what it was. And I know we're getting off topic. What one of my old teachers, she says, like the reason why that film was really good is that you didn't have to understand Shakespeare to enjoy that film, and if you did understand Shakespeare, you felt way smarter than you actually were. So I'm
Well,
like, well done, Top
they,
Stopper. All right.
they tried to appeal Shakespeare with the Romeo and Juliet, the brilliant Romeo and Juliet film that they made in the 90s. Like to broach it to an audience that wouldn't usually understand it in a context that they could.
Right. Well, it's
Yeah.
weird. Like the I think it's because in one of my classes we had to keep doing a couple different scenes from Romeo and Juliet. So I was kind of
Mm.
sick of that play by the time that DiCaprio one came out, and I'm like,
Oh,
oh, Jesus.
I, I I kind of know that feeling because when like it's a little bit similar, but probably not very. When we were at school, we used to have on the last day of school they would allow us to watch a certain video,
Hmm.
just because the teachers didn't want to teach us anymore, and so they just bung on a video, and it was always Grease.
Oh, really?
And I brought in like comedy videos and stuff. Let's put this on. Let's watch like Me, Myself, and Irene. Let's watch this film. Let's watch that film. No, teacher says Grease, and so now I can never watch Grease because I'm so sick of it.
Right. Well, Grease is one of those rare occurrences where the movie is way better than the play. Like,
Right.
like that movie is a great movie. I've watched that thing over and over and over again. I've fallen in and out of love with Stockard Channing. I don't know how many times, but because Rizzo's awesome. But yeah, I remember like seeing the play, and I'm like, oh, this isn't good.
Yeah.
The music doesn't really make I don't know. But yeah, that's all I remember is when it was a. I remember the first time I saw the preview for Romeo and Juliet, and they had the movie announcer guy, two
Oh
houses both alike in dignity, and I'm like, Jesus, I'm like here, and then I saw it, and I'm like, well, it's got John Leguizamo as Tybalt, that can't be all bad, but yeah. Shakespeare is weird because I wasn't even that big of a fan of it, but when I was living in New York City, even if you were super broke, you could always get 2 free tickets to the Delcourt Theater to see Shakespeare in the Park. So, like every play, they would do one of like his more successful plays and then one of the lesser plays. And the last play that I saw there was The Tempest, with Patrick Stewart was playing Prospero, and it was one of the most amazing productions I had ever seen. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
That was awesome. The first one I ever saw was The Merry Wives of Windsor, and it was placed in Windsor, Ohio? Yeah. And David Allegretti was in it. He did a really, really great job. So I'm like, wow, it was kind of cool to see like comedic actors and stuff that you never see him do Shakespeare and like really knock it out of the park,
Yeah. Yeah. I've never had the opportunity to watch Patrick Stewart do anything like that. I really want to. But when you talk about that, I'll give you a bit of a contrast of something, because I know before on some of your shows you've talked about Doctor Who before.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like I went to see, this was going back about 15 years ago now. I went to see a play at a theatre down here. It was Dracula, and they had Colin Baker playing Van Helsing.
Colin Baker, remind me if I'm drawing a blank. I'm sorry.
Right, the patchwork coat from the 70s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
See, I didn't get into Doctor Who until they kind of rebooted it, and who was the guy before David Tennant? Shit.
Oh yes, Christopher Eccleston.
Yeah, exactly. There's a bunch of Doctor Who fans that are like, you don't know Doctor Who. You don't even know who the fuck you just said. Yeah, they're going nuts. Anyways, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Yeah, well, yeah. Like, don't insult them too much, because man, I'm one of them.
No, I get it. It's kind of like there was an April Fool's joke that they posted. It was like it wasn't this year, it was last year. I think you might have even commented when I reposted this year, and it showed like an American version of Doctor Who with the guy from Evil Dead.
From Evil Dead.
Yeah, exactly. Because he posted that on April Fool's last year, and then everybody was all excited, and then we're like, wait a minute, and then everybody's like, I hate you so much. But I'm like, Doctor Who, that's like, America has all these awesome superheroes and stuff like that. Like Doctor Who, that's the British superhero. That's the freaking badass over there. So, like, we don't need an American version over here, But anyway, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
No, that's fine, because it's all we have. All we have is Doctor Who and Idris Elba, man.
Right. I know my wife is super excited to see the new David Tennant movie. Was it The Bad Samaritan?
Oh, right, yes.
Man, that guy, he does. I mean, he's an awesome actor, but I mean, obviously he plays a great doctor. But when he plays a bad guy, holy shit, is he so evil?
Yeah, well, it's the same actually. It's interesting with the castings of Doctor Who and where they've kind of gone on to, and you can see it with both Tennant and with Matt Smith, because Matt Smith ended up being the face of Skynet.
Oh wow!
Yeah, like if you saw the last Terminator film, Terminator Genesis, it was like Matt Smith, who played the Doctor after David Tennant. He went on to being the face of Skynet. So if they do any more films, I believe they'll probably look at casting him again.
Huh. That was really interesting. I kind of lost it. I kind of lost interest in during the Matt Smith phase, and I know it's not anything personally against the guy. It's just it was really like, who was running the show after?
Was it Moffat?
Yeah, I think Stephen Moffat,
Stephen
right?
Moffat, yeah.
Right, and it's pretty weird because I loved what he did with Sherlock. right?
Yeah.
And Sherlock was absolutely amazing, but it kind of seemed like if anybody who's like, I don't know if they're Doctor Who, that seems like a really big series. I don't know if I want to jump into it or if I want to just start watching it now because I'm not know what's going to go on. Watch just the episode of Blink. David Tennant was the 10th Doctor, the one with the first time you see the weeping angels, because that episode stands alone on its own, right? You don't have to watch the whole entire thing, and that was such a terrifying episode, and that's kind of what the crux of what Doctor Who was for those particular seasons, where it was a sci-fi show, but there was a small element of horror in every one of those episodes, and it was weird because the character, he was a very, very strong, very tortured character, but he was also something that like girls can get into.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which most girls who would never really want to get into a horror show, they could totally get into Doctor Who, and it was this really weird niche. But as the series went on, it was kind of like, hey, you know what's scarier than 4 weeping angels? A whole planet of them. You know what's scarier than a whole planet of weeping angels? One the size of the Statue of Liberty. You know what's scarier than that? I'm like, I think I see where we're going, dude.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think at that point Moffat was more focused on other projects and just went like, oh, what haven't we done big yet?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, just have a big Dalek.
Right.
You know? Oh, we've got one of those. It's called the Gherkin in London. Oh, okay, we'll make that the Dalek thing. You know, yeah.
But and there's ups and downs of everything. I've yet to see the new one. It's a female Doctor now, right?
Yes, I haven't seen it because I don't know if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's come out yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I think they're making us wait.
I'm sure it'll be cool. You know what? One of the things is what's so kind of like I had this idea. I'm still trying to write it where I wanted to do. Hopefully, if I can actually write out the script, I'll send it to Barry, and I'll just mention it on here because at this point, if somebody else writes it, that would be fine as long as the story gets out there. But it was an idea to have a crossover 4-part comic series of the Doctor versus Batman. And obviously they're both good guys and stuff, but they approach things completely differently. But the idea, what I always thought would have been really funny or interesting, is a conversation between the Doctor, because I'm thinking the 10th Doctor, because that was my favorite one. Between that the 10th Doctor and the Joker, which I thought would always.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah, exactly, because the Joker was basically. No matter what the Joker does, it doesn't faze the Doctor, because he's like, "Oh, what? You just killed 100 people? What? You're a little scared boy with clown makeup on." He's like, "I've killed millions of people that I actually loved in order to get with it." It's kind of like, do you think anything that you're doing is making a difference? And the whole thing is it because. Just the question of like the Joker's ego can't stand the fact that he can't do anything that's evil enough that the Doctor hasn't already done. You know what I mean? And I thought that would be a really interesting idea. That I'm like, there's some good drama in there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I suddenly just had the idea in my head of no matter what the Joker does, he can never win because the Doctor's got a time machine.
Yep.
And then I was suddenly like, well, then that completely negates everything from Doctor Who. Like, anyone ever getting the upper hand on him, I've got a time machine. I'll just go back and I know what you're going to do now.
Well, I think what the differences between the two is that the Doctor is somebody who has all this guilt about him, right? That was one of the things. Is like he kind of has this this. I wouldn't say cynical view, but a very practical view of how the universe works. That is how the good guys don't always win. Sometimes horrible shit just has to happen. The favorite line is like, "I'm sorry. I'm so very sorry." Yeah. Because that's basically is like this is the way that it's going to have to be, But he's somebody who's been able to kind of look at and still find a reason to care about people. And that's something that the Joker can't ever do. And that's where it's I don't know. Like I said, that it's kind of philosophical, I think, but I don't know. I was a big fan of the show, but after a while, man, like a lot of these streaming shows, like I want to be able to watch all of them, but at some point I'm like, I haven't been to a mic in at least 3 days. I should probably go out there and start, being an entertainer again.
Yeah, yeah, I kind of get that. Like, I don't actually get to watch a lot of TV or streaming shows. Like, people are always like, oh, you should watch this, you should watch that. Like, the other day you were saying about Lost in Space.
Oh yeah, I've only got one
Yeah,
episode in, but holy shit, it's good.
yeah, I haven't even gotten round to. I need to. And I remember people saying about Star Trek Discovery, saying, oh, like, give it a chance, get through it, like, past the first, like, 3 episodes, and then it gets really good.
Right.
And I've not even started on that. Just backed up on things like the Orville and all kinds of things.
The Orville was good. You know what was so funny, and this is kind of going. It kind of goes in along with what we were talking about as far as like material and stuff. Is that I think that there's a lot of issues. Like Battlestar Galactica did a really good job with this, or the reboot of it, of taking a very touchy situation and realizing that not everything is always black and white. There's just massive shades of gray constantly.
Yep.
And the Orville did a really, really good job. I mean, I think why people were shitting on in the beginning because they were expecting to be Family Guy in space.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that as
Oh
well.
yeah, and they're like, it's not really funny. I'm like, no, there's comedic moments in it, but it's really what it was about. Like, remember the movie Galaxy Quest with Tim Allen?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
every time I watch that movie, I'm like, I really wish there was a show of this because I really wanted to watch it. And that's kind of what the Orville is. They've tackled a lot of social issues, but they have a good way of disguising it in the realm of sci-fi, which I think is
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
I guess
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I guess it's as a fan, Seth MacFarlane's kind of nod to Gene Roddenberry.
Oh yeah,
Because Gene was all about kind of breaking down any social boundaries and whatnot. Look at like casting a black woman in the original Star Trek as a main officer.
hmm
The whole big thing about the kiss,
oh yeah.
that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's probably very much in keeping with that kind of thing. The whole ethos of Star Trek being that all those boundaries are gone. Like, there's no money in the world. Everyone's just out for betterment and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and they just folks are kind of trying to live their life and expand, their knowledge and stuff as much as possible. Like he did a lot of things. The fact that there was also a Japanese officer, because I keep
Yep.
forgetting that this is post World War II, right? And also in the midst
Yep.
of the Cold War. So the fact that there was a Russian on the bridge as well as a Japanese gentleman, of course, by George Takei, it was really. Kind of groundbreaking. Well, absolutely groundbreaking. Like they didn't even air that first episode, I think, in the certain parts of the South of in this country because it was considered too extreme to even show an interracial kiss.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that was less than 100 years ago, people. Like
Yeah.
less than
Yeah.
100 years ago. It's we've come a long way, even though I know a lot of folks might not feel that way, but I think we have.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, you had like you're in a situation right now where there's so many people questioning whether it's going back the way, and I kind of look at, because they base it on the politics of media, what they see. Like, so people over here will say, oh, the Americans are going back the way, they're reverting back to the way things used to be because of what so-and-so said. And it's like, no, it's not. Most people are decent human beings. It's a sensationalized media because it's a quiet news week.
Yeah, they're trying to make money off of them. They're trying to make money off of the general population's anger and hate.
Yep.
It's super difficult not to like the clickbait ads and all the other stuff is just kind of like, hey, hear what your mother said about you. What? Like, how is that online? Like, holy shit, yeah. Oh, look, we're trying to go. There's these people out here that want to get a law passed that says they want to allow to molest your pet animal, and you're like, what? Oh, these bastards, And it just I think that's why I saw that coming a little bit with just in I mentioned Battlestar Galactica way too many times in my podcast, but
Are you
uh,
a fan?
oh yeah, exactly, yeah, a little bit. But when they told a story, it was like a 45-minute long story, like a lot of arcs and stuff, and they kind of dealt with a lot of nuance. And then I tried watching like Law and Order SVU or whatever, right? And
Yeah.
it's basically was like taking all of the nutrition out of a particular story and replacing it with a bunch of sugar and just throwing it up there and the little bits, the juiciest parts. You know, we're like, what's the situation in the story that's going to piss you off the most? That's going to get you glued, to the screen, and that's kind of what I was seeing. I'm like, yep, here's a sign of things to come, and then that's kind of what things are right now, at least with social media and stuff. So, I'm hoping, at least as far as in the United States, anyways, was that people are starting to realize that they're being had. They're starting to realize that, like, okay, this particular cause that I believe in, I still believe in it, but the people who are trying to get me riled up about it, they're trying to get clicks. They don't really care about what this particular issue is, and I think hopefully folks are starting to kind of come out of it, but uh, I don't know. It's a bizarre world. I don't think that we're necessarily going backwards, but I'm definitely seeing a cycle. Like there was this bit that I was working on where I'm like, hey, do you guys remember the '80s? Oh, do you remember Madonna? Oh, do you remember that? Yeah. Do you remember nuclear war? Do you remember constantly be afraid that you're going to get nuked at any point in time because that was on the news all the time? Do you guys remember that? Do you remember the satanic panic? Do you remember that? The religious zealotry in the United States where anything that you did, if they thought that you were outside of the norm of what was quote unquote Christian lifestyle, that you were trying to corrupt the minds and hearts of all like the Satan was trying to work through you, that there was congressional meetings like the government, like town councils, adults who had graduated college were literally trying to figure out if a mythical being was trying to influence their children and cause them to kill their parents. Do you remember that? And but it was weird because that was just this fanaticism that came along, and I see, and this might get me in trouble, but the causes are different, but I sense the same energy,
Mm.
and it could be very, very dangerous because eventually, I mean, no matter what, we're comedians. We have to take ownership for everything that comes out of our mouth. And I'm just waiting for the general population to kind of catch on to the same thing, that they also have to take responsibility for the shit that comes out of their mouth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm like, okay, if we got to be the example, if comics have to be the example, so be it. I mean, we're artists. That's what we're supposed to do. But, I'm like, all right, but you guys need to do the same thing as well. You can't, if you disagree with somebody, you can't call them a Nazi, especially, like, actually, I'm not going to say that example, but, but yeah,
No, I
everything.
know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's on both sides of the coin with it, like that, and especially certainly on like we have over here with our politics. There's anyone who's left wing, and then anyone who's right wing, and if someone's like a right winger gives their opinion on something, the left wing goes straight for the Nazi kind of thing. Now, I'm more of a left winger myself, but
Hmm.
I don't go for that kind of approach. Like, oh, I don't agree with you, so clearly you're in Satan's back pocket. You're currently scratching his ass, and he's enjoying you being there.
Right.
Like, I'm not like that. Like, it's just like I don't agree with you, but like, yeah, good. We both got different views.
Yeah, it's kind of strange. I think there was a Facebook conversation that I was looking at with one of my friends, and I usually try not to get involved in any of those, just because I'm like it's a effort and futility, I believe.
Yeah.
But the I think, and I consider myself more leaning to the left when it comes to social issues. On a lot of
Yeah.
issues really, but when they start getting kind of really nuts and stuff, I'm like, do you not understand you're you're being nuts right now. You're not winning over any hearts or minds. You're not giving anybody an example or a reason to want to see things your way when you're acting completely just, crazy. But the thing is that I'm trying to remember that I grew up in a world without the internet, and then the internet was around. A lot of these a lot of younger generations and stuff, they grew up with the internet. So I keep forgetting that they grew up in a completely different world than I did.
Yeah.
So I'm doing my best to not have that gut reaction to kind of be like, oh, that's stupid. I'm like, all right, let me see how they're trying to see things, and then,
That's it. Yeah, it is exactly how you say, a generational thing. The whole communication, how they've learned how to communicate is by, especially I used to do things about Twitter, and I used to say about nothing good can be said in 140 characters or less, and that was the thing,
yeah,
It's that form of communication. Like I can't express my emotions unless I can do it through an emoji.
yeah,
It's literally like we laugh about it, but there are people with that kind of mentality. How can I express myself if there's not an emoji with a tongue sticking out?
yeah, right.
It's unfortunately it's quite sad, but at the same time it shows exactly where we are
Hmm.
as society in means of communicating with one another, or
Oh,
certainly understanding the means of communicating with one another.
well, I'm hopefully that I am hopeful for the future. Absolutely, and I think hopefully they'll get it. But sometimes I'm trying. This is where I think I'm messing myself up, is that I'm hoping that a lot of the younger generations will see reason, but I have to wait for their bodies to stop producing so much testosterone and estrogen
That will
because,
never happen.
yeah, nothing is like my friend Cleo. He said this. He's not even a comic, but it was one of the most important things he's ever said to me. He was like, human beings are constantly on two very powerful drugs of testosterone and estrogen, and they never ever give any clear-headed thought or thinking, but we need it in order to find a mate. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's a bizarre cosmic joke on us, where you, if somebody had to prescribe it to you when you were a kid, and the doctor says, "All right, we need to put you on testosterone," I'm like, "All right, what's this going to do?" "Oh, it's going to turn you into a raving asshole. You're gonna want to stare at girls' tits all day long. I'm like, are they gonna like it? No, they're gonna fucking hate you for it. But your skin's gonna get almost, doing all this other stuff." He's like, well, I don't think I want any of that. Too late. You're already on it. I'm like, ah, shit. Like. So what do I do about this now? Nothing. You just suffer for it for the rest of your life. Have fun, anyways. You can get yourself a lollipop on the way out. All right, bye.
It's not true. It's not true. They got Ritalin, man.
Uh, Dude, there wasn't any. I mean, there were so few people that were on psychiatric drugs when I was going to high school. Like, if I was going to high school today, like I definitely they would have put me on a couple different things, you know. And it's kind of bizarre where I'm like, I'm still trying to figure out, is a person mentally ill or are they just an asshole? And I haven't been able to figure that out yet. Like Asperger's, right? Which is like a mild form of autism, and
Yeah.
it makes people very, very. They have a harder time being communicating socially, and I have a nephew of mine who has Asperger's, and this kid, it's really, really hard not to want to like this kid. As soon as he starts talking and stuff, he's just saying like these really offensive things, and you're like, eh. I don't know how to react to this situation. I'm like, is it because of his just the way his brain works, or I'm like, how do we move forward from this without, you know?
Well, this is it. It's so hard now to pin it down. What it comes down to is like when I was the same when I grew up. There was a lot of these things. They existed, but it was in textbooks and it was very rare cases.
Mhm.
You know. So now, like where everyone's on the spectrum of some kind,
Right?
and you know what I mean. You have like things like the Asperger's and various different other medical like mental illnesses and stuff. And I get exactly what you say. Is this person an arsehole or not? I kind of go like this person just doesn't know how to communicate with people, and what that comes down to is whether it's part of their upbringing as well.
Oh
It
yeah.
has to be, like you can't just go, oh, he's got Asperger's. Like a doctor just goes, oh yeah, he's got Asperger's. No one ever goes, why? Like why do they?
Right.
Like there's no kind of is there a way we can claw some of these things back slightly? I mean, I'm kind of, I guess I'm going into an area that I don't really know a lot about.
Hey, me neither, but we're two white guys. Well, let's talk about it.
Exactly. So yeah, it was just for me. It's very much like not so much like blaming the parents or society or anything like that, but certainly a air of taking responsibility. Like your son or daughter has this. The reason why is because like we've done some tests and we figured out they have a lacking of an understanding of how to talk to people or how to do this. We think it's from this. Is there something you can do to facilitate?
Right. And still, it's a definite Gordian knot for certain. My first wife, she was a special needs school teacher, and she would usually work in like low income parts of town, or poor parts of town and stuff like that. So when she actually got a job at a school that was like in a fairly affluent part of Phoenix, it was drastically different because usually in those places it was a single income family, right? And so they had at least one parent that was able to spend more time with the kid. And that was a massively big factor. I mean, you take a kid who's got like some what they would call emotional disabilities, which is like whether it was Asperger's or autism or bipolar schizophrenia, stuff like that. The kid's got a massive freaking weight on their shoulders and stuff, and it's going to be very difficult for them to learn how to social interactions. Now, take that same kid who got a parent that could spend a lot of time with them versus both parents that are working two jobs. Good luck.
Yeah.
Hopefully there's a special episode of Different Strokes on TV where they can learn something, but for the most part, that kid's fucked, and that kid's going to turn into an adult at some point, and then what are we going to do there? So it's definitely, there's a lot of stuff to deal with those issues and stuff. A lot of it, I mean, you could start with income, inequality, things like that, but there's no magic bullet that's going to fix everything. That's the fun. I mean, the good news is that we got plenty of things to talk about as comedians. So,
Yeah.
like, heaven forbid they fix all this stuff. Like, what I never saw in Star Trek? Comedian. There was no stand-up. No stand-up. All right? The only job Whoopi Goldberg had was as working as a bartender. That was as close as they got.
Yeah.
Other than that,
that was a bit of a funny one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like, that was like a joke in a joke. But she was brilliant in it, but it was that kind of thing of like, I don't know whether it was like, I remember watching it thinking like, she's brilliantly funny and she's not making jokes and she's essentially the help. You know what I mean? And I was like, I don't know if this is okay because I'd rather like to see Whoopi Goldberg not be the help but be like the lieutenant commander.
Right. Hey, she was at the bar, though. I mean, I don't know if you ever bartended before, but there's a lot of authority in that position. She could have cut off Picard at any point, 86th him out of that place. Like,
I want to see the episode where she pours Jean-Luc like some absinthe, like the Green Goblin, and just like, Jean-Luc, you're about to have a real interesting evening.
Am I going to the holodeck? Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, you never saw anybody do that. Do a bunch of psychedelics and just hang out in the holodeck and see what happens. There's still more work that could be done on that show, definitely, for sure. So as we're round a third, man, where can folks get to know a little bit more about Ann McEwan? Can they, as far as about your shows and stuff that you have that's coming up?
Oh yeah, sure. So best bet is hit me up on Facebook, facebook.com/TheAntMcEwan. That's the best outlet to find me. I'll be posting up various things about gigs that I'm doing, terrible jokes that I've written, rubbish that I found in the news,
right?
Whatnot. That's the easiest place. Otherwise, hit me up on the radio site. So again, on facebook.com/loudlunchlive. You hit me up on there. We're always posting up stupid pictures of me in the studio, usually on my own.
Yeah. That's awesome, guys. And if guys, for any of my upcoming shows, I'm going to be at Comedy Works, the famous World Denver Comedy Works, for the New Faces contest, May 30th. I'm trying to get as many people out there as possible, so it's going to be pretty awesome. Apparently, Siri thought I was talking to her. Okay, my phone just went off. That was weird. Either way, so that if you guys want to hit me up for tickets, hit me up on Twitter at DisJointed Films. Holy crap, Siri, shut up. All right.
I forget how you turn it off.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Siri, how do I turn you off? That's awesome. There was this one point where I'm like, hey, Siri, do you share my information with the FBI? And she answered, I don't have to tell you that. I'm like, that was creepy. But yeah, at DisJointed Films, man. Or don't forget to follow me on. You can get the audio. I put the video up on this, but if you guys want to catch the audio, I'm on SoundCloud, I'm on Stitcher, I'm on iTunes, I'm on the Laughable app. There's a bunch of cool stuff here, man. So, man, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to do this, man. I know you're a busy guy. Aside from all this other stuff, you got your kids and you got all the other stuff, and I think it's super admirable what you're doing, man. You're trying to build yourself an awesome show out there in Brighton. I can't wait to come check it out at some point.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and thank you so much for having me on. And if you are, like, I always find this is awkward saying, oh, if you're ever in the area, man. But yes, if you are ever in the area, come hit me up.
Absolutely, dude. Yeah, one of these days I really want to. Now I've kind of at the point in comedy where I need to get out of town in order to get better. You know, because at some point you got to hit the road and stuff and see where you're at. You know. Like, oh, this does great in Brighton. Now I got to go to Hull and see if I can make people laugh there, you know, or whatnot. But
that's where the challenge is, man.
Yeah, right. That's where the work is. So yeah, at some point I'm gonna get I want to get a couple of comics from Denver. I'm like, all right, get some passports. We're gonna go to the UK and we're gonna hit up a bunch of stuff there. Let's see what happens. So yeah, I guess that's it. So, signing off for the DisJointed Podcast, I'm Dave Germain, and for McEwan, thank you so much, guys, for listening. You guys have a great week.